All right, we're going to get started in a few seconds, so if you can find your seats and get the last minute snacks that are outside. There's good news that there's a queue here. I can read the queue here. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the IETF 122 Bangkok Plenary Session. It's wonderful to see everyone here in person, and I'm seeing quite a number of individuals online and kind of around the world able to join us, which is wonderful. To introduce myself, if we haven't met before, my name is Roman Daniliu. I am the IETF chair, but more importantly, I am the facilitator of all the different presentations and all the different kind of speakers here this evening. Of course, this is an IETF meeting. You've probably seen this before, but this is a reminder of your obligations when you participate in any IETF meeting, which is to note well. There are a number of policies and procedures that are outlined there. Please do familiarize yourself with them. We have a pretty typical plenary agenda this evening for you. We have a number of reports from the different leadership bodies. After that, we'll have different open mics for, again, all the different leadership bodies. Bookending that is going to be a little bit of an introduction from our host. And then we have some special topics related to an in memoriam, and then bringing back a bit of a tradition of getting a knock report. To all future speakers, the clicker is a little slow. The magic that is this meeting, and it's been wildly kind of successful to date, is really built upon the work of a number of different teams that you see there working. It's the secretariat staff, it's Meet Echo, it's the NOC team, it's the NOC volunteers, it's the LLC staff, it's the tools team and the hackathon support. We're going to do a kind of a lot of clapping, but I really want to recognize this team for the hard work in pulling off this meeting. Thank you so much. But this meeting does not happen without the generosity of some sponsor coming forward and helping us pull off this meeting. So with profound gratitude, Juniper is a host for this meeting, and I welcome Kiriti Kumpala to come to the mic for a few words for us. Again, thank you, Juniper, for kind of sponsoring. Oh, yes. Even better.
Thanks, Roman. I have to admit that I have this tiny frisson, a tiny shiver of pride every time I look up and see Juniper sponsor. I see it on the badge. I see it on my colleagues' badges. So that's just nice, but that's also just me. We do, as a company, recognize the value, the importance of the IETF, even more so the whole internet. And it's not just something that you go because you want some entertainment. It is life and death. It is a means of a livelihood. It is a whole lot of things. And what the IETF does is do all the protocols that underpin the internet that make it a better, more secure, and more productive place. So we understand that, as John put it, sitting there, it is also an existential requirement for our business. So I know you said thank you, Roman, but I'm going to turn that around and say thank you for the opportunity that we can support this. As you pointed out, there's a whole bunch of people that behind the scenes are doing a bunch of stuff that make this all possible and effective. I do also want to call out the IESG, the IAB, the working group chairs, the people who are present here in person, and the people who are attending remotely, just a whole bunch of people that make all this possible. So it's really nice that we can be a little part of that. I will leave you with a promise and a hope. The promise is that we'll be back as global hosts. I don't know when, but we will. And the hope is that your next speaker from Juniper will be a lot more articulate than me. It will speak at much greater length with much more gravitas. I'm just going to get off the stage. But I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to let this august body march on with their agenda. June need me anymore? May I get off the stage? I'm sorry, I had to do that. You guys. Thank you so much.
He wasn't. All right. Yeah, he needs to get it back. So.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to pivot to the different reports from the different leadership bodies, and I'll be up first with the IETF chair report and the report from the ISG. There's always a number of participant stats that we modulate based on interest, and I'm always looking kind of for feedback about less is more. You want to see more of something else, or dive into a few details. I'll unpack a number of these stats as you're absorbing them. A couple of things I want to point out. New participant rate, that is new individuals that have never registered before for a meeting. That was about 15% of this meeting, which is about par. Between 15 and 20% are all newcomers, first-time attendees for our meetings. There's really copious use of the remote fee waiver, which is kind of phenomenal, about kind of 40% of participants. But what I really want to call out from the stats here is just the tremendous engagement in the hackathon. Phenomenal. I think we had a record number of projects, and I think a record number of remote participation kind of projects. So we're seeing this inflection point of on-site participation tipping towards more remote participation, which allows everyone from around the world to participate and influence the standards process, which I think, again, is really, really phenomenal. Breaking out the participant stats in a different way, we often report where do people come from around the world. We had representation from about 70 different countries and economies. And then if you squint really, really hard, but more realistically have to look at the slides in MeetEcho, you can see the different countries that are sending a number of people, that is measuring 10 or more individuals, and that's a little bit of an arbitrary kind of cut line, but gives you a sense for where the centers of gravity are. Another way to look at the participation is, again, what is the fraction of remote to on-site? And we're seeing roughly the same participation in that band of between 40, 50, or kind of 60, depending on the meeting, of who's remote and who's in person. And to foot stomp, again, the remote fee waiver has been a transformational enabler of participation through the remote process. And this meeting, like in the previous probably 5 or 6 meetings, we're seeing uptick in the band of 40 to 60% of all participants who are remote are making use of that fee waiver. If you are out in the community and you are talking with someone that wants to participate in the IETF process, and you hear, I'd really like to participate, but boy, I don't have the money to do so, please remind them that you can absolutely dial in to any IETF meeting and get the fee waived, no questions asked through that kind of remote process. No human's going to be in the loop. The process just happens. Please encourage everyone kind of in your network to participate that has interest in the standardization process. There's a couple of ways to introduce this slide. I always like to look at this is our future IETFers, our future engineers and future policymakers coming just very early to our meetings. The cookies are always very phenomenal here, so there's a big kind of draw. I'm told that we had 5 children kind of participating in this process. And from the way we have structured the kind of the financials, we have a long-term kind of commitment to continue providing IETF childcare. We know this is critical to allow participants that have young kids at home to be able to come here on site, and we're very much committed to supporting that. So it's been kind of phenomenal. I hear they had quite a lot of fun, maybe more than some of us had so far. Now we're going to get into some of the things that are in the chair report, so I'm going to go perhaps a little bit more quickly. There's already been some discussion in the community after the IESG summarized what was happening with the all dispatch experiment, what the community may have not seen because we dropped it, I believe, yesterday, which is a statement on clarifying BCP 14 keywords. And then other things your IESG has been working on is we've actually had a number of the appeals since we got together last. So there have been 3 appeals filed, and as of earlier today, we've had the response to those 3 there. And if you go to the proceedings, you can hot link and get the particular details. So one of the things you probably noticed in the last couple of plenary meetings, when I get questions from the community, or I feel like there's something we want to dive in a little bit deeper, I bring that to the plenary for potential kind of discussion. One of the things as I've been kind of out and about in the community as part of this role is I've been really trying to kind of understand the power of the remote participation to bring individuals kind of in the IETF. And it's been a little bit of an article of faith, at least for me, until I looked at it a little bit more about whether in fact the remote participation model we have with the email we've had since the origin of the IETF, or since probably around the COVID time when we went to the high quality hybrid participation through Meet Echo. And really, I think the trend we've had, I don't know, certainly going back at least kind of 6 or 7 years, that many working groups do interims. Does that class of remote participation really allow you to be actively engaged in the standards process? There's a lot of different ways to kind of measure this, and with kind of Robert's help, we were looking at what can we get our arms around to really kind of count and convince ourselves, not in an anecdotal way, but in an empirical way, that this is pervasively happening across the organization. And you know, what do we do here at the IETF? We make documents, we make kind of standards. And so the quick look we did was, with a look back period of 3 years, just 24, 23, 22 of all the RFCs published, and in the other hand, we held who are the remote only participants, and that's defined by who has not appeared in the registration system in the last 10 years as on-site. The 10-year look back is a little bit of how much data we really have. And what you can really see there is that the remote participation is working, because whether you're looking at 0-0 drafts or finalized published RFCs, the rough proportion of the documents that have at least one remote only author, and sometimes it could be more, but at least one remote author, is around 40%. And that trend largely holds whether you're talking about 0-0, which is the initial kind of submission. It carries you through working group adoption, and it also carries you through to the final published RFC. And so this gives, I think this should give us confidence that the remote participation mechanisms we have, whether it's the confirming on list, just to reinforce why that's so important, and doing reviews on the list or with GitHub, and then ultimately all the hybrid approaches we have allows high-end participation from all over the world. And then I have a couple of other kind of charts, and I'm always looking for feedback whether this is good for the community or kind of not. Over the last couple of meetings, there's been kind of some feedback. Is the IESG processing documents as fast as they should be, with the community understanding that, you know, whatever fast should be? And so this is the snapshot chart I've been using for the last couple of meetings, and you should see that, you know, two things. First, you have been very, very busy. We are at almost record rates of publication requests since we last got together. But I hope the other thing you see is that your ISG has been working very, very, very hard, pedaling as fast as they can to try to process those documents and work through those backlogs. So on the charts you see there is the working groups getting documents published, which is fantastic. That's the blue bar. And on the orange bar is the documents that made it through all of the different ISG processing states and have been sent to the RFC editor. And in particular, you know, I want to really acknowledge the hard work of all the area directors. It's the turnover right now, and it's always helpful if the turnover to the next AD is as clean as possible to give them a fresh start. And so there is quite a strong push to get dockets as clean as possible. Another slide, another metric that I've been kind of using, but this may be the last time you see it unless we see a deviation, is there was some concern in the community that things were sitting with area directors unprocessed for a long period of time in publication request. So that is the time period where a working group has sent a document to the AD, but they haven't done anything kind of with it. So hopefully the community can see the ADs have been working really hard to clean things up coming into the meeting. There is nothing in PubRec that was submitted before the last meeting, and it's actually quite a lot better than that. And by raw count, there's less things in PubRec than there have been in the last couple of meetings, and also the wait times of processing have also been dramatically shorter. So one other detour I wanted to take the group into, and this is relatively new information, is we've talked a lot about in previous plenaries and in this plenary a little bit about the pipelines coming out of working groups, which participants have a lot of insight into because they're in the working groups. Then there's been questions around what is the IESG doing, and we've talked a little bit about this and in previous meetings. And what I teed up at the last plenary meeting was trying to unpack the question I know I get and other ADs get is, well, we just last called it in the working group. It's done, right? No. It's got to go through ISG processing. Okay, the telechat is done. My document's in RFC now. No. There's another step. It's going through the process of professional editing through the RFC production center, the kind of the RPC. And the most common question I have heard is, well, how long is that going to take? And the answer is, it depends. And one of the things I talked about at the last plenary was there's two buckets of it depends. There's time you as the working group and authors control, and then there is the actual professional kind of editing time. And I wanted to share in a little bit of detail, like what is the average experience of documents moving through said kind of process. So first you can see that roughly the median time for a document to move through the RPC process, which is the ISG is done to it makes an RFC, is a little under 19 weeks. To unpack the colored states, blue is things authors have control over and working groups have some control over. Yellow is the actual time where it is out of the hands of those writing the documents and the working groups. One of the big contributors to wait times of documents working through the RPC is what's called missing references, that you submit a document, but it's waiting for other references. So this is often referred to as the misref state. The vast majority of documents, about 60%, don't wait very long, but about 15% wait for a while. And by a while, it's at least 3 months, and in some cases, we're talking many months. And that introduces quite a lot of delay and contributes to what you can see at the top, the measures that pushing 28 plus weeks. The other joke I know I've heard in the community is about the Auth48 process. That is, after all the editing is done, the authors need to do the final approvals of the changes that's made. And we talk about what is the unit of Auth48. Ostensibly, the unit is 48 hours. But from 3 years of all the RFCs being published, 2% make it in 48 hours. And 40%, almost 40% take over a month. And so this time is actually, the RPC has, this is largely characterized, the RPC going to authors and saying, hey, are you good with this? And let's include the ADs, they're also kind of included in that. And so timely responses directly impact how quickly things exit out of the process. And this is a little bit of a peek on how quickly, in fact, the responses come back. And in the middle is the yellow time, which is which I'm summarizing as professional editing. This is in fact when the editors in the RPC are doing their magic of kind of editing, formatting, and making everything that we all have written look better and kind of presentable and all that. And that, by the numbers, that is the time most documents, that's the longest state that documents spend, and the median editing time is a little under 12 weeks. So I just wanted to share this part of the document pipeline because over the plenaries, I've talked about things in the working group, talked about things in the ISG, and this is the last part of that pipeline. And I would encourage kind of editors and authors as you're kind of thinking about responsiveness in Auth48 and also got distracted. Someone else is trying to share slides. And kind of references as well. If you think about how you sequence documents out of the working group, that directly contributes in about how quickly things pop out. Okay. And so before I turn it over to the next leadership body, I want to end with one final thank you. The ISG that you're going to see after we cycle through kind of the open mic, their participation is 100% possible because some sponsor allowed them to kind of come here. And I just want to acknowledge their respective employers or their respective sponsors that allow them to do week after week processing of documents, spinning up working groups, and helping you be as productive as possible and make the standards that make the internet possible. So thank you. And I turn the floor over to Tommy Pauly, chair of the IAB. You got to push the clicker really hard. Push it real hard. Yeah.
Is it working? There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Tommy Pauly. I'm the chair of the Internet Architecture Board, the IAB. I just want to give a couple highlights of stuff that happened this week and what's happening recently for the IAB. We hosted 2 sessions of IAB Open, which is where the IAB gets to talk to the community this week. And the second one was specifically on the WSIS +20 process. That's the World Summit on the Information Society, if you're not familiar with what that is. If you're interested in internet governance, et cetera, please watch the video if you didn't attend the meeting. It was a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to see how the IAB, along with the Internet Society, and also along with policymakers, is going to highlight the important impact of the IETF within the multi-stakeholder governance model for the internet. So if that's something you're interested in, please take a look at that. Give us feedback on what you'd like to see there. Also, we've had, over the past 6 months or so, some great IAB workshops. One on AI control, another one on network management, where we got a lot of great input and feedback from the operator communities. We have some workshop reports out for that. If you're interested in those, please read them, provide your feedback, and get engaged on the mailing lists around that. And then finally, we have some updates going on to the RFCs that explain how the IAB and the IETF manage liaisons with other SDOs. Liaisons are a very key, important part of the job and the role of the IAB, and we hope that these updated RFCs are going to help make that overall process clearer, easier, and just more effective overall. So if you're interested in these things, please reach out to the IAB. Otherwise, thank you for all the support from the community, and we will talk to you next time. All right. And now I'm going to hand things over to Colin for the IRTF and Dirk. And I guess one of the other things that we did recently on the IAB is that we had to appoint our new incoming IRTF chair, and we're really excited to welcome Dirk, and we thank Colin for all of the work that he has done. So please give him a hand.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. You really do. All right. My name is Colin Perkins. I'm the outgoing IRTF chair. I would just like to highlight a couple of things which have happened in the IRTF recently, and perhaps reflect a little on the last few years in this role. One thing which I am very, very pleased to announce is that we have finally published the IRTF Code of Conduct. This is a document I've mentioned a couple of times in the preceding plenaries. We've been discussing it in the IRTF open meetings, in the Internet Research Steering Group for the last few years. And I'm very, very pleased that this was published, I think earlier today, as RFC 9775. The IETF has had a code of conduct for many years, RFC 7154, but this has been focused primarily on effective conduct of the standards process. This new IETF code of conduct is structured around how to conduct research effectively in an open, inclusive manner. Both the IETF code of conduct, the IETF document we've just published, reference the same anti-harassment procedures, the same inclusive language guidelines, the same ombuds team, and so on. The differences between them are around research integrity versus conduct of the standards process and things like that. If you're active in the IETF, I would very much encourage you to read this document, pay attention to it. Thank you to everyone who contributed. There's a long list of contributors on this document. So we've had feedback from a tremendous list of people. Please do pay attention. I think this is an absolutely essential document, and I'm very pleased that we've got it out. I also want to think a little about how the IETF has evolved over the last few years. We have 15, I think, research groups in the IETF currently. Over the time I've been IETF chair, we've chartered 3 new groups: the Research and Analysis of Standard Setting Processes group, the Usable Formal Methods group, and just recently the Sustainability in the Internet group. We've also had a significant rechartering of the decentralization of the Internet group to focus more on economic and social and political aspects of decentralization and perhaps less on the technical aspects. And we've closed 2 research groups, the Computation in the Network group and the Network Coding group. One of the things I have been focused on in my time as chair has been perhaps changing the set of topic areas where the IETF works. Perhaps moving away from some of the core traditional networking topics, moving perhaps up the stack a little, broadening the scope to include more economic, internet governance, environmental impact issues, and trying to widen the scope of the IETF. And this has very much been an intentional approach. One of the things the IETF, I think, has to do is push the boundaries of what we talk about in this community. To try and bring in new ideas, try and move the community forward, not just let the community focus on the same set of topics it's always discussed. The whole point of the IETF is to bring in new ideas, new work, new topic areas. So I've been intentionally pushing things, trying to widen the scope, talk about new approaches to building standards, new approaches to internet governance, to environmental impact, to the centralization of the internet. Not just the pure technical work we've traditionally done in this community. This clicker really needs new batteries. In addition to that, we also run the Applied Networking Research Workshop. We run the Applied Networking Research Prize in conjunction with the Internet Society. I think these are both tremendous activities. The workshop, the prize, are doing a tremendous job at raising the profile of the IETF. They bring in some phenomenal new people. Some of the talks we've had, the prize talks, and there's a couple more tomorrow, but the prize talks over the years, the papers in the Applied Networking Research Workshop are fantastic. There's some absolutely fantastic work happening here. It's doing, I think, a brilliant job of raising the profile of the IETF, the IETF community in the wider research world, and helping us to connect to the academic research community more broadly, raising awareness, connecting to communities, the standards community, and perhaps the parts of the academic research community that had somewhat perhaps drifted apart. And I think these are essential for bringing new people and the next generation of participants into the IETF and the IETF community. So thank you to everybody who has participated, helped with that. And I'd like to conclude by just thanking the community. It's been an interesting 6 years as IETF chair. I was perhaps not expecting a pandemic in the middle of this. liven things up a little. So I would like to, I guess, start by thanking my wife, who, after having sat through so many IAB and IRSG calls during the lockdowns in the pandemic, can perhaps do this job as well as I can. I'd like to thank the research group chairs, the IRSG at-large members, for all the support that they've provided, for all the tremendous amounts of work they've done running the research groups, keeping the IETF moving. The ANRW program chairs, the program committee, the award committee members for the Applied Networking Research Prize. There's a tremendous amount of reviewing goes into picking the prize-winning papers, picking the papers for the workshop. People put in a tremendous amount of effort there. So thank you so much for the effort people have put in. Thank you to the IAB, thank you to the IESG. There's been a tremendous amount of support from those people, those communities. Thank you to the people in the Internet Society. I remember back when I was deciding whether to take this role, I was talking to Lars, and we were talking about the administrative aspects and to what extent this was a political role. And I remember Lars told me, don't worry about it, it's no more political than being a working group chair or something. A couple of years later, I found myself at a United Nations meeting. Thank you to the Internet Society for helping me find my way in that. And finally, thank you to the Secretariat, to the LLC, particularly to Jenny, who is right down here at the front, who has done tremendous work keeping the IETF moving over the last few years. I think has had more experience as a travel agent with running the travel grants than she would perhaps want. So thank you to everybody who has contributed. Thank you, everyone. I've had a fantastic time. Thank you. Thank you. And with that, I would like to hand over to Dirk. My successor in this role is Dirk Kutcher, who is a professor at HKUST. He's been a long-standing participant in the IETF and the IRTF. I think you said it was 1998 you began participating. So he's been here for long enough that he should know better. I think I leave the IETF in fantastic hands. Dirk has been a research group chair for many years. He's been a participant in the IETF for many years. And he's a very capable researcher in his own right. So Dirk, thank you very much. Good luck.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thank you very much again, Colin, for what you have done for the IETF. It's really a pleasure working with you, and I think you really accomplished a lot. So the IETF is really a unique organization in the world, right? So it is facilitating and conducting excellent research that helps continuously evolving the internet, and it also brings excellent people to this community. And so that's these are the two main tasks that I've set for myself. And so thanks to the generous support of the Internet Society, Comcast, and NBC Universal, we are able to award the Applied Networking Research Prize, ANRP. And so we do this at every meeting. So we try to find like the best recent results in applied networking, interesting new ideas that could really matter for our community. And so quite often we manage to bring promising people here who have the potential to make a bigger impact on our research, but also standards development process. And so we are very glad that we have two excellent prize winners this week. But they will both present their work tomorrow morning in the IETF open session. So we have Janjie Wang, and he is going to present his work on using large language models to support network configuration. And then we have Henry Burgee-Lee, and he's going to present work on using secure collaborative path control in BGP. So if you are interested in that, please come to IETF Open tomorrow morning. And yeah, so as Colin mentioned, so we have the Applied Networking Research Workshop, ANRW, which typically takes place in the summer IETF. And so if you haven't been to that, there's a full-day workshop. It's typically really exciting applied networking research result presentations, and so a very excellent TPC that selects really work that is both good but also relevant to our community. And the submission deadline is coming up soon, so if you are working on interesting topics, please submit before April 15th. Okay, and so thanks to our supporters, Ethnic, Akamai, Comcast, Google, and Netflix, we are also able to offer travel grants to support early career academics and PhD students from underrepresented groups to attend our meetings. We basically pay their cost for attending the IETF meeting. And our statistics, it's like 20% male, 80% non-male attendees, 60% from Europe, 20% from Africa, 20% from South America. And so this time we moved the deadline for applications a bit earlier to make it easier for people to obtain their visas before the meeting. And that's it from my side. Yeah, please help me to continue making the IETF a really useful and interesting institution. So I think we have a really unique setup here that combines excellent research with relevant work. Thanks very much.
Very forceful, with enthusiasm.
Hi. For the photographer, my lanyard in the superposition. So after you take a photo of me, it will be probably about 99.9% white. I was, for the past 12 months, the NOMCOM chair, and it was a very interesting experience. And I have to say, working with this group of people, with hearing their different perspectives on the IETF and some of our processes was quite interesting. And I want to thank them all for pretty successful NOMCOM that we had this year. So again, thank you personally in my name and in community. I can also probably say in the name of the community. You will see later, these are the people that we have selected this year. It was an interesting process. We had very interesting materials to read. As well, the conversations were informative, and it would have been better if we had some more support from the community on feedback on some of the nominees. We received about 1,000 reviews from the community. Some nominees received 80, 90 reviews. Some nominees received as little as 10. And the interesting part that some of the nominees that received 10 reviews were very strong nominees during the selection process, and it was hard for us to do the evaluation because we could not find out more what the community thinks about some of those nominees. Okay. There was a lot of talk about DEI, and Stephanie was right. It was my mistake. There shouldn't be caps in bold, so the Secretariat could have changed that. It was sort of a reminder for me, but I forgot to update it and just send it out like that. First of all, I want to thank Michael Hatcher, who was a lawyer that specializes in DEI, and the IETF LLC has organized training and consultation for us, for the NOMCOM, to help us looking through the documents as well to adopt the process. He said that we are trying to do the right thing, and we are, from the process point of view, in really good shape. Our documents that are written are very much in line with the best current DEI practices. So that is the part. We have some of the problems that we can fix, but he said there are no fundamental fundamentals problem with the DEI from a process perspective. I personally believe that one of the biggest problems for the IETF participation, and that is starting to change, is the economic reason. Because how we were organized before, it required a lot of on-site participation, and with the changes and better improvement of the remote participation, we will be able, I believe, to improve diverse participation within the IETF. The question is also how much we will be able to include, because our industry in general is very, I'm the male and bold driven industry. So we have to figure out how to improve outreach, mostly to different groups that we would like to include. And I think one of our problems that I realized within the NOMCOM is how we should combat the unconscious bias. This is, for the NOMCOM process, quite a big of problem, and I will say that a little bit more to that on the next slide. And DEI is not once and done, it's a continuous process refinement. To the next NOMCOM chair, I will pass a bunch of materials that they should read upon and see what can be adopted, what can be approved. And as the NOMCOM process is, it's always a continuous learning. And it would be good to apply some of that learning. The community really feels that new participation and new and fresh perspectives have to be brought to the IETF, especially also to the leadership, because there is a feeling, there is a stagnation within the IETF. Some of that is to the extended tenure in the leadership roles, and there were many comments, oh, people are just rolling over from one leadership role to another leadership role. And that was quite a significant sentiment within the feedback that we received from the community. People with the longest tenure had the most amount of feedback, and that the stagnation was associated with that was mentioned in that feedback. And the other part, they were saying we have to take risk in strengthening the leadership pathways. There is often happening, there is a new working group created, there is 2 experienced working group chairs put into that position. We should have a process saying every time there is a new working group, there should be an experienced working group chair and a person that wasn't a group chair that we can create a pool of viable future leaders that we can then select in the process in some future. So about reality. NAMCOM process is obsoleted. It has been designed over 20 years ago and 25 years ago, maybe, something like that. And yes, it has been updated, but it was designed for the times when everybody knew everybody and it was easy to make some of the decisions. As we are growing as an organization and we have more and more participation, including the remote participation, also due to how NOMCOM functions, where few people do most of the work, some of the unconscious biases are coming out. So what do I mean by that? People who are most active in the IETF, who are also NOMCOM members, they are the ones who will do most of the work. And there's about 50% of really active contribution by the NOMCOM members, and they are doing the alliance part of the work. So for those people who are very active IETF contributors, as well NOMCOM members, their third meeting is completely shut. Few of the NOMCOM members did 15 to 17 interviews in 4 days. That means they spent between 15 and 70 hours in a room interviewing nominees. And that is quite a lot of time where it doesn't leave you much for your IETF participation. And this is something that we have to change in the process because yes, we have 10 members, but some did 4, some did 17. And this is an ongoing thing that is happening. When I was a voting member in 2018, it was a very similar situation. And speaking to some other NOMCOM chairs, this is pretty much the sentiment that has been going out for a long time. So there are some good reasons that we have to change the NOMCOM process. We could also change and encourage, as I mentioned, starting with the working group chairs, that we can improve the pipeline. For the RTD, we were begging people around, hey, can you please nominate yourself? Because we didn't have any nominees until mid-October. That is a problem. And with all of this, we were having, we were really missing a good-sized pool of future leaders, actually candidates for the leadership positions that could bring in some new voices and come up with some new ideas how we could do certain things. And for that, I feel as a NOMCOM chair and also as a voting member that we are very reactive. Why? For example, I don't know if really NOMCOM selects and elects the leader, or is it the confirming body? Because this is not defined. And we should really define that who should be really deciding who will be the new leaders. And again, that's why I'm saying there are a lot of room for improvement, and some of the things that have been over the years just continuously somehow undefined, left undefined, put under the carpet are starting to show as the monsters out of dark areas we should be fixing, and not leaving to the chairs and the voting members to figure out how to handle some of the exceptions, how to communicate, how to vote. It would be a very nice thing to know, hey, what voting process should we deploy? It shouldn't be up to us to decide which way is the best way to vote, how we can, really do that. Do we really have to do all 63 nominees interviews? Is there a way that we could disqualify some of the nominees before we interview them? Because we are trying to figure out how we can reduce our workload, because 4 days for interviews, 1 day for voting, and this is quite a bit of work in a short week. If you try to do the voting remotely, there are problems and we cannot have a proper communication. And some people, although they're present, they're really not present. One last thing is that NOMCON chair should have an official IETF email inbox. There are several reasons for that. I made a mistake that wasn't big, but it was big, and it's on me because I wanted to communicate some official things, and then things happened. But some of my emails that I sent to the nominees and is in the nominees' spam boxes because I'm using a private Gmail inbox for communication. So there are things that we could make some better use of the tools that we have. And lastly, thank you, everyone. And thank you for sticking with me for a year. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to being the NOMCON chair. I love learning, and I learned a lot about the IETF process as a NOMCON chair, about the confirmation process, had my thoughts about what should be changed, what not. But it was a fun journey. And I would encourage everyone in the community to take the opportunity to be a NOMCON member, either as a voting member or as a chair. And if you decide to do that, spend the hours to do the work. It will be really rewarding. You will learn so many things from the different areas, because usually you're stuck in one or two areas where most of your work, and you will learn some interesting ways how some other areas are solving some of the problems that you're seeing in your area. So again, thank you, and looking forward to the better IETF.
So I really want to emphasize on behalf of the community, Dan, the NOMCOM role, the chair, is critical to really the leadership pipeline, as you were talking about. It is a thankless job. It is a very challenging job. And we can't thank you enough for what you have done to choose the next cadre of leaders. So thank you so much. Do you have the clicker? A parting gift. Ah, Glenn, excellent.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the IETF Trust Intellectual Property Management Corporation report at IETF 122. So for those who've been following at home, we are undergoing a restructuring. We're changing from the IETF Trust to the IPMC. We'll talk about where we're at in that process, but for now we have two names. Well, you know, Dion talked about NOMCOM, and one of the things NOMCOM just did was we've got a new trustee. So we have an outgoing trustee, unfortunately. So Kathleen is departing. Kathleen has been a trustee since 2019. She was part of the group that took over the trust when we did the IASA restructuring. And so thank you very much to Kathleen for your years of service. She served 2 terms, and she's been our treasurer. So I guess we can now go crazy and spend money because there's nobody around to say no to us anymore. And Kathleen, we're going to be sending you one of these, although not this one. This one's really old. I'm going to give away a secret here. This was from when I was the chair of the LLC. I signed here and Alyssa signed here. This is a very old plaque. But Kathleen, you'll be getting a real one signed by a real proper signer. So we have a new trustee coming in. Wendy Seltzer just joined the IETF Trust, the IPMC. Welcome, Wendy. You have been appointed by the IETF NOMCOM for 3 years. Wendy's formerly W3C strategy lead in council, and she had been the W3C liaison to the IETF. So she knows the community really well, and she's now going to be part of the trust. So welcome, Wendy, to the group. We might need tech support up here. It says, the screen I see says, we have a little problem. The server is currently unable to handle the request. Oh, so this screen is not working, but that screen's working. So hey, let's go roll with it. So that leaves us with the following 5 IETF trustees and directors. Here on site this week, we have myself, we have Victor and John. So if you have any questions about the IETF Trust, flag us down and ask us. You missed office hours yesterday. The IETF Trust had our office hours yesterday afternoon, and we had 1 visitor. So thank you to the 1 guy who came and chatted with us for a little while. We tend to be pretty lonely. All right, so our report status-wise, since we last met in Dublin, we've had 1 licensing request, which we've dealt with. We've issued 0 new licenses. We've had 0 new trademark licenses issued and 0 legal actions. Now, if you wonder why these numbers are so low, it's because the IETF's intellectual property framework is designed to have passive licenses. So if you are compliant with the licensing terms, like you're going to use it for doing new RFCs, or you're just implementing the RFC, you don't need to come to us and get a distinct license issued to us from us. You can just go ahead and use it. It's a very flexible framework. So these numbers being low, in fact, are a sign that the trust is operating really well. If you ever see the bottom one ever start becoming not 0, that means we're having issues we don't want to deal with, because they're legal actions and they're never pleasant. So 0 is a really good number. So restructuring update. So where are we at with that? There is a new RC 5378 that's in draft that we're working on, and we're going to release that for comments probably targeting May. It's going to go through the regular IETF RFC review process, and that's how that's going to eventually pop out. So the stuff that Roman talked about in that whole process, we're going to follow that. There's a new TLP. So what is the TLP? This is the licensing provisions that I mentioned that allow you to passively use the stuff that IETF produces and the IETF Trust holds. So TLP 6.0 will have the updated licenses and the new boilerplate that's the stuff that appears at the top of all those internet drafts and those RFCs that mention the IETF Trust. There's going to be a new version of that coming. And the boilerplates, when we finally get these things done, there'll be a cutover, which we will widely announce before it happens, that here's the cutover date. We're switching from the one that says IETF Trust to the new one that says IETF Intellectual Property Management Corporation. That will be coming later this year. Stay tuned. All right, other updates coming along. We are going to launch a new website. The existing IETF Trust website is going to be kept as a legacy. It's going to be around forever. It's going to hold all those old TLPs and all the old IETF Trust information. And in May, I expect a new launch of the brand new website with that new address, IETF IPM for Intellectual Property Management for the IETF. And finally, the last other asset we're working on is the IANA stuff. For those who've been around for a while, the IETF Trust also holds the IANA trademarks and domains, and we are a approver for when changes want to be made to those things as part of the IANA transition for many years ago. And we're currently working with the CCG on getting that transfer approved. And if you want to contact us, here's our email and here's our website. And Roman, over to you.
So Sean, you're stepping in? Jay? So if anyone that's helping with the tech wants to come to solve, we have the little problem to reload whatever's required, you feel free to come up, but we are clicking through and projecting here.
Hello, I am Jay Daly, the IETF Executive Director, and this is part 1 of the IETF Administration LLC report. So I'd like to start off by thanking very much our host for this meeting, Juniper Networks. Thank you. For those of you who have not been to one of my presentations before, there is a lot of clapping. So we also want to thank the gold sponsors. We have a number of different categories for these, and within our diversity and inclusion category, we have Akamai and Huawei, and within our running code category, we have Ericsson. Thank you very much. And we jump straight from gold to bronze. We have no silver at the moment, but within our bronze, we have within diversity and inclusion, we have Comcast and ICANN. Within sustainability, we have NTT, who joined us as a sponsor recently. Within running code, we have ICANN and CNNIC. And within open internet, we have DE-NIC and Nominet, who also joined us recently. Thank you all very much. The observant amongst you will note that we have a spread now across equipment manufacturers, operators, and application providers and things. So, and thank you to our two IETF 122 local supporters, the Thailand Convention and Exhibition Bureau, and our friends at THNIC, those who run .th. Thank you very much. Now, I also want to thank our equipment services and connectivity sponsors. One of them has been particularly generous, which I'll mention in a minute, but these are the people who provide us free or very significantly discounted services that enable us to run things in the background. Thank you very much. So new contributions this year. We have Ericsson and Nokia have both renewed their global host contract for a number more years, so they will be hosting meetings in the future. Juniper have become a global host again, as we heard from Kariti, and with the intent of hosting more meetings. RIPE NCC have once again given us a very significant cash donation as part of a multi-year donation. And then, most astonishingly, we have Cisco who have given us several $100,000 worth of equipment, as they do every few years, which is what runs the network at these meetings. Thank you very much. A little plug, you can buy t-shirts from our online store. With worldwide delivery and in your size. And yes, I'm sure that's been great fun. Next, so we are only able to operate with many generous volunteers. On the code sprint on Saturday, we have these volunteers who turn up and write code for IETF systems, largely for data tracker. And within the NOC, we have these volunteers, and you can see their organizations to support them there, who come and give their time to set up the network for the meeting and help run the meeting throughout the week. Thank you very much. The team includes within the secretariat, multiple people, those who you'll see around with the teal coloured shirts on. The MeetEcho team, of course, who are providing our remote participation services, who actually work the longest hours of anybody here. And then the NOC contracting company that we use, the ones who are just fixing the problem over there a minute ago. So thank you all very much. And this is the IETF LLC staff. We have a new software developer down in the bottom right, Rudy. Moving on. Just try that again. Yes. So thank you to all of our global hosts. These are the people who make a multi-year commitment to us. They pay us a significant fee to host a meeting, generally once every 3 years for each of them. We have a set of 7 here, and we have one more that we're hoping to announce sometime soon, and then one more after that that we are actively chasing to get us to a full set of 9. But in the meantime, thank you very much to these 7. IETF 123 is coming up in Madrid in July, and that will be hosted by Ericsson. Look forward to seeing you all there. Registrations are already open for that. And here are our future meeting locations and venues. So as mentioned, IETF 123 in Madrid, now open. IETF 124 in November this year, hosted by Comcast and NBC Universal, will be in Montreal. IETF 125 next March in Asia. This has been a very complicated and complex contracting process and is still underway. We hope to be able to make an announcement sometime in some weeks' time about that. IETF 126 is in Vienna for July next year, and we are looking for a global host for that. IETF 127 is in San Francisco, again looking for a global host for that. And then we are now looking to be booking IETF 128 in Asia, IETF 129 in Europe, and then beyond that, IETF 130 in North America again. At this IETF meeting, we launched the new participant program. So this is a completely revised new participant program that with the specific aim of helping IETF participants become productive and effective. So we went from a 1-hour presentation to a whole day of presentations with 50+ people in each session. The presenters were almost entirely volunteers, largely working group chairs, who spent some time putting a lot of effort into this. So thank you very much to them. That worked very well. We'll be measuring success both immediately with surveys and over time to see whether we really have achieved something with this. For those of you who have been in the IETF a long time, the IETF has significantly grown in procedural complexity, and you have grown up with that complexity. For those people who come to it new, that complexity is something that can be daunting, and that's the purpose of this training program, is to help people get up to speed with that complexity from the get-go. And also big thanks to Karen O'Donoghue and Rich Sauce, who gave the predecessor new participant induction session for many years. Thank you. So now Jason isn't here, so I'll be handing over to Sean for the next session.
Yeah, I'm not Jason in a brightly colored shirt. All right, let me just hit the button. Where is it? Let's see. Thanks for the tech support. All right, we'll skip past this. I'm not going to thank myself. Hey, so we're getting replaced. Jason and I have been on the board for a while, since the beginning. Was the ISOC board appointee. Gonzalo is going to replace me, so you'll recognize some regular faces. Roman is going to continue. Miriam is the chair. George Michelson is the NomCom appointed, and then Shauna Turner, who is not me, is still on the board. She's the treasurer. Just kind of let you know that we have meetings and they're open and you can come. So this is the list of the meetings that we have monthly in April and May. There's also a retreat that's planned. I should let you know that there is an open session, obviously, of the meetings, and we do pause and take questions. So you don't have to wait to bum rush us here at the plenary. All right, so it's the fiscal year operating budget. It's the money slide. The thing I guess I want to raise your attention to really is the fact that since Aaron gave us a bunch of money last time, and we thank them and I thank them again, the ISOC contribution, the matching funding came as well. So that's why the number is so big for the investment income. Everything else, I guess you can ask questions about later, but I guess I would like to note that the budget has actually been, approved and forwarded and posted. And you'll see that. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. Our current work, fundraising, ongoing. It's always ongoing. That's what we do. The other thing that we did was the second IASRA review we completed. You can read all the notes about it there. We're obviously we're improving our onboarding process since this is really the first time we did it. So we'll be having some lessons learned. Luckily, we've got some experienced people and they know how to ask questions. And again, we've scheduled a board retreat for May. I believe it's in Amsterdam. And then this is a bunch of contact information. So if you want to send us the board an email, there's one there. There's a discussion list. If you want to send a mail directly to Jay, executive director. And if you want to give some money, sponsorships, you can send it there as well. And then there's a bunch of web pages about, you can read about the people and the policies, et cetera. And that's it. Thank you.
So we're bringing back a slightly older tradition that we have phased out about a report from the NOC. And so Warren's going to come up and tell us more.
Yay. So I don't have much time, so I'm going to be going through this quickly. But this is going to be a quick update from the IETF NOC. If I can make the clicker work. There we go. So we would like to bring back some transparency to the community about what it is that we build, how we build it, why we build it that way. And that's because we want to get feedback from you on whether the network is actually doing what you want, if it's providing the services you want, etc. This is just a short update. There will be a side meeting on Friday from 9 to 9:30, I believe, where you can come and ask more questions, more feedback. So, as Roman mentioned, we used to do these NOC report things at plenaries, and we used to talk about all of this sort of stuff, which I personally thought was kind of boring. The stuff that I thought was more interesting was funny things that happened, like the fact I can't figure out where to point this. Maybe it's RF, so it should. Anybody? There we go. So, when we do the site survey, we bring along what we call the Scout router, and we leave that behind. And that way we can plug in the circuits and test them. We can set up BGP. We can make sure that everything's working. More importantly, we can also start announcing the address space from the location. That makes geolocation work, etc. This time, we did all of that well in advance. And then when we brought in our main network stuff, I moved the circuit from the Scout to the Junipers, and the circuit refused to come up. And I twiddled all of the knobs, and I fiddled with all of the Ethernet order negotiation, and I fiddled with the speeds, and I turned all of the possible knobs that I could, and I swapped the cables, and I swapped the SFPs, and I swapped the interfaces, and nothing would work. And then, eventually, we discovered this message somewhere in syslog, basically saying, if you change the internet speed and the system is not restarted, it needs to be restarted. So apparently changing the port speed on a Juniper SRX 4600 requires rebooting the whole box, which takes more than 8 minutes. So at least we learned that before the meeting. We also had some physical layer fun. So this is a wall-mounted cabinet with a 70-pound UPS in it and a patch panel. And we needed to run some fiber through the patch panel, so somebody climbed up on the ladder and opened the door and swung it out on the hinges and swung it out a bit more on the hinges. And then the bolt fell out of the concrete. And so we ended up with a NOC person standing on top of a ladder for like half an hour, holding a 70-pound cabinet above his head while we tried to figure out what exactly you do in this situation. Apparently what you do in this situation is you have a look in a storeroom and you find some old IKEA bookcases, and well, you put everything on a bookcase. This is just temporary. After we leave the hotel, we'll be fixing it and putting in bigger bolts. We also made some things better. We rely on the IETF, we rely on the hotel infrastructure to make the IETF hotel network work. That's also the one that exists in the lobbies, etc. And when we arrived, it would work for 25 seconds, and then it would break for 10, and work for 25 seconds and break for 10. We decided you probably wouldn't enjoy that. Was also, if you browsed the network, you would see everybody else's machine, and if they had open shares, you could browse those as well. not a good idea. We worked with the hotel network people, and it turns out they were doing broadcast suppression, which is actually forwarding broadcasts, but then the APs would also do suppression as well. So they would discover way too much broadcast, shut themselves down for 10 seconds, the broadcasts would go away, they would undo the interfaces, the broadcasts would come back. So we worked with the hotel and fixed that. IETF hotel now seems clean and good, and you can no longer browse your neighbor's laptop. So we think this is working relatively well, but we do have a favor for all of you. We would very much like to be able to do an IPv6 mostly solution. We wanted to do that in Bangkok. We demoed it in Dublin. Unfortunately, we didn't get enough people using it. We didn't get enough information. So please join and test the IETF-IPv6 mostly SSID. Everything should just work. Go on, I'm waiting. You can do it now. Go on, go on. If you don't do this, Jen and Eric Fink will cry and they will be sad. So we want to do this for real in Madrid. Will be the primary thing, and please come to the side meeting.
From a moment of levity to a moment of real sadness. Since we last met in our community, Bernard Aboba has passed, and we have a video as a tribute.
I attended the funeral of our colleague, Bernard Aboba, and was one of the pallbearers. I also passed on to the family condolences from many who posted thoughts to the IETF mailing list, and his wife appreciated getting those from all of you. I first met Bernard at IETF about 1995 when we were both working in the MBONE-D working group, and we began collaborating on an inventory of multicast debugging tools and writing them up in a troubleshooting guide. I was then at Merit Network and he was at MSN. I enjoyed working with him, and Bernard was the one who recruited me to move to Washington State, where I have lived since 1998 and raised my family. Bernard and I continued collaborating on various standards across the years. He served on the Internet Architecture Board twice for a total of 8 years. He and I served on the board together for 5 of those years, and so we worked closely together during those times. The thing I enjoyed the most during my years on the IAB was the work on documenting what makes for a successful protocol. Bernard and I worked together to create what became RFC 5218, with input from the rest of the IAB and the community at large. It was truly a joy to work with him on that project. Bernard had a PhD and an MBA, and his ability to analyze case studies and determine why a supposedly inferior technology became the dominant one was unparalleled, and he drew upon work he'd done in authoring 2 books before then. Microsoft once hosted the IETF meeting, doing so in Orlando in March 2013. Bernard gave the host presentation about it, and I remember him saying in that presentation that people asked why Microsoft was hosting the conference in Orlando rather than Seattle. Bernard said, well, back then we looked at the weather report for this week. He put up the slide that had days from Monday through Friday. And he continued, Seattle, rain, 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 rain. And then Orlando, sun, 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 sun. Any questions? The entire audience got a good laugh, and sure enough, that weather report was 100% accurate that week. I always enjoyed working with and talking to Bernard, and sometimes we would just get together to talk about technology and share ideas and brainstorm together. Twice, in the week just before and the week just after he passed, I was in open source community meetings to discuss the relationship to them of our RFC on protocol success. I was able to share a bit about Bernard's work with others in his memory. I will miss working with him, but will always have fond memories, and his legacy will live on through his work. Thank you.
I'd ask us to take a moment to remember the memory of Bernard, our friend and colleague. Thank you. We are fast making progress through the slides again. We didn't go this quick last time. It's faster this way than the clicker, as you've seen. Can I be advanced one more? The clicker is misbehaving. Got it. Okay, so now I invite the Internet Engineering Steering Group, the ISG, new and old, come on up. So if you are new to the plenary, we are now kind of cycling from the formal presentations to the open mics with the different leadership bodies to whom you can ask kind of various questions. So kind of start thinking the kinds of questions you would like to ask, perhaps the ISG, the IAB, and the LLC. It might be helpful if your partner, if you're swapping out, the incoming and the outgoing could sit next to each other.
Would it be nice if you suggested that?
Earlier.
We all sat down.
It's almost like you've never participated in one of these before. All right, so this is your ISG. We're going to start with some introductions at the very end. Kitan?
Hello, Ketan Talalikar, Routing AD.
Jim Kishon, Routing AD.
Gunther van der Velde, Routing AD.
Deb Kulisek, AD.
Ori Steele, RAD.
Palavatos, Sec AD.
Warren Kamari, outgoing Ops AD.
John Scudder, Routing AD. I would say outgoing, but nobody's ever called me that.
Nobody's ever called you Routing AD?
Mike Bishop, incoming with AD.
Francesca Palombini, outgoing with AD.
Roman Dinelio, IETF Chair and Gen AD.
Erik Wijk, Int AD.
Jayada Jaman Sharkar, outgoing with AD.
Mahesh, Ops AD.
Tommy Pauly, IAB Chair.
Eric Klein, Int AD.
Gori Fairhurst, incoming WIT AD.
Med Bukader, incoming Ops AD.
Murray Cucciarelli, discontinuous Art AD.
Andy Newton, incoming Art AD.
Okay, so that's everyone. So before we begin with open mic, we wanted to really begin with kind of the tradition. We'll do something called the dot passing, but before we do that, I want to just say a few words for the great team that unfortunately is outgoing and moving on to bigger and better things. So first, Murray. Again, it's been phenomenal working with you. The couple things I will remember first, all things IANA process of educating us on and doing registrations for everything, much appreciated. 2, wrangler of all appeals. Thank you kindly. And then lastly, I know who's going to sleep really well tonight. It's going to be the terror of that the unexplained shoulds in various documents have felt through much balloting. They feel a lot more comfortable now that you're not on the watch. So thank you for that. Next up is Warren, who I will say, if there's ever a need to volunteer, thank you so much for being typically the first or at least second person to raise your hand to say kind of you'll help if anything is required. And with kind of a little levity, I didn't expect to still be on the IESG and you leaving first. But in all seriousness, congratulations on your promotion. I hear the hours are better over at the IAB. So that's great news. Thank you, Warren. Francesca, I have always been humbled with the breadth of knowledge and just really the diversity of the things you know about kind of in the IETF. You can do art, you can do SEC, you can do WIT, you can do all sorts of kind of working groups, and boy, that's phenomenal to have had you kind of on the team and helping progress things. So thank you for that. Zahed, I feel like I need music because it is the end of an era. You are the last of the transport ADs. The things you've had in your portfolio, the obvious things like TCP, and then the other very obvious things that are transport like file systems. You know, it makes a lot of sense. So thank you for all of that, Zahed. And I wanted, and next up is John, and I really want to acknowledge in all seriousness the load that is the routing area, the number of working groups, the number of documents that they have to process, and just kind of bearing that through 2 terms is really impressive. And 1 term is impressive, 2 is even more. But I think the thing that you can be most proud of, John, is you walk out, I think, with the unicorn as the errata slayer. For those that haven't looked, and maybe that's changed, but I'm going to take it from this morning, 0 errata in the routing area. Like, wow, mic drop there.
Yeah, now go file some errata.
Yeah. So all the outgoing ADs will get a lovely plaque mailed to them. And then we're going to do a tradition we do here in the IETF, which is called the dot passing, where the outgoing ADs take the dot and they hand it to the new incoming ADs so they can have it on their badges. So carry on. This is the part about it would have been better to strategically sit together. This is more fun. Yeah. Okay. Oh. I want to shake the hands of all the outgoing ADs. Okay, it's now time for open mic. Do you have questions for your ISG? No. Not. Randy. Oh, Randy, please.
Randy Bush, Arcus, Initiative to Japan. What can we do to see that we keep hearing about diversity, even if we have to go half the frigging planet away to hear about it? I heard it both in Dean and the other talk. I think it's critical. I'm in a culture that's losing it. And I have one, the question is, the suit working group was 50% attendees women. What makes that work? I'm a measurement researcher. When something like that happens, I want to know why it works.
I didn't. Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question, so I gotta. All right, that's flying by. So if someone from the ISG kind of read it kind of fast enough, I'm sorry, Randy, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah. So we keep hearing a lot about diversity, yes, but it's a continuing struggle for us. The suit working group is roughly 50-50 male and female. What is special about them? How are they managing it? And how can we expand it to the rest of the IETF?
That's a great question. I'm not aware of kind of those demographics or what is the kind of the secret sauce kind of happening there. Do the responsible ADs in SEC have a sense for that? Sounds like something certainly we should learn from. I'm looking at the responsible ADs. So Randy, it seems like we need to dig into it. I don't know what makes that working group special, but certainly something we aspire for. Suit is yours.
I guess I didn't realize Suit was 50% women. Certainly my chair, I have a female chair and a male chair. We can't hear you when you speak. Can you? Yeah.
Sorry,
Please.
I mumble with or without the mask. I was going to say female chairs probably helps, but I really don't know. But I counted the room. I was, one of those, I always sat in the back of the class and noticed.
So you mean attendance in the room, not necessarily?
Correct.
Okay, I understand. I don't know why. I do agree we need to work on it. We need to work on it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Randy. I'm reading the queue right. There's no one in there right now. So are there any questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you so much. Coming up is the IEB.
Rowan, yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. So up here we have the full IAB, the Internet Architecture Board, and again, we will do intros. Do you want to start from that side?
David Skenazy, outgoing enthusiast.
Chris Wood, outgoing IEB.
Mia Kullivan, IEB.
Colin Perkins, outgoing IETF chair.
Dirk Kutscher, new IETF chair.
Warren Kamari, incoming IAB.
Wes Herdiker, free at last.
Matthew Bocci, IAB.
Roman Danilio, IETF chair.
Tommy Pauly, IAB chair.
Chingu, IAB.
Alvaro Retana, IAB.
Colin Jennings, continuing fluffy.
Dhruv Thuri, continuing IAB.
Suresh Krishnan, continuing IAB.
All right. So as with the ISG, we do have a number of outgoing members this year. They will also get a plaque to all of them. And I'll just say a brief word about each of them, and we thank all of them very much for all of the contributions and service and time that they've put in with early meetings or late meetings or whenever that is for them. Alyssa, I think, is not on the call right now because it's more important for her to be asleep right now given the time. But it was really wonderful to have her back on the IAB. She was IETF chair when I had started on the IAB, and it was great to have her expertise. And even in the short time that she was back on with us, she had a really huge impact helping arrange things like the AI control workshop. So many thanks to her. We also have Wes, our DNS expert and expert in so many other ways. And and I'm glad we could find a Warren to help continue some of that DNS expertise, because there are times when the IAB gets a request to approve something that needs a lot of DNS know-how, and it's great to have an expert on here. So we appreciate that. David is our primarily AI-generated meeting summary enthusiast. You all are missing out on some real gems of emails there. So hopefully he can bless you with some of that content in other fora. I'm also going to miss having my doppelganger on the IAB. And Chris, you're a great privacy and security advocate and expert, and thank you for your passion for doing the right thing always. And also Colin, as the IRTF chair, has been a great part of the IAB, helping us and guiding us in our discussions. And you have left big shoes to fill, and luckily Dirk is going to be a great addition as well. So thank you. Let's give a hand to all of them. All right. So now we have our open mic, and here's everyone here. We also, I should mention that Jason and Jana are not with us right now in the meeting, and Mark as well, but they are all incoming on the IAB. All right. Yes, Dan.
I will repeat a question that I received as a NOMCOM chair, and this regarding the IAB. And the question was, looking at the IAB slate, it doesn't even represent the IETF community. And what will we as a NOMCOM do in order to address this issue in the future? And you as an IAB as well.
Yeah. So I think, partly that is what we get from the community of who is volunteering and how that goes through NOMCOM, but hopefully on the IAB we can make what we are doing very visible and have transparency, and hopefully encourage everyone in the community who is interested in this type of work to join that. I guess if anyone else would like to speak up.
Can I add to that, Tommy?
Please.
So thanks for the question, Dan. I think, well, we definitely have a pipeline problem. The only reliable pipeline we have to the IAB is from the ISG, and that's really not that great, but we need better. And what I will say to the community is it's not a hard job. Like, you might need to get good at memes or some other things, but honestly, if anyone wants to contribute and spend a little bit more time to work on IETF and get to know how it works, give it a try, put your name in. Like, I did that, did it for 2 terms, 4 years, and learned a lot. So anyone who's sitting in this room right now could do it, and it was really not a big time commitment, so you should all consider it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I mean, I've served on the ISG and the IAB, and the IAB is definitely more fun. No, because maybe some of you don't know exactly what we're doing, but that's, the fun of it. We can actually define what we're doing. We can actually look at some of the hard technical problems, and and we need different expertise. So if anybody's interested, I'm really happy to talk about this. Please come and see any of us and talk to us.
All right, thank you. I think Matt is next in the queue.
Oh, this is kind of an informal question. I'm just curious in general, what prevents the internet from becoming its own country and IETF being its government or something like that? There's already a lot of population, 5 billion, and using the internet, and you already work on a bunch of stuff. So
It's an interesting question.
That one.
Go for it.
So this is a fascinating question. And
the crypto people have looked in quite a lot of what it takes to try and form your own country or different things. And it turns out to be surprisingly difficult to do that. Now, I don't know that we can really do that, but I think that we can think about what is a country? What's the best parts of it? You know, I come from a country, Canada, where we think it's already great. And we'd like to see the internet become great. I think what we can do is think about how we can help build the tools that allow people to have a really great internet experience worldwide and for the whole world. So making that inclusive and bringing everyone in, making it not toxic, all of those things are things that I think everybody works on here. And when you're on the ISG, it's really hard. There's so much day-to-day stuff to move the documents forward you have to do. But the IAB, as someone said earlier, the hours are better. I think at the IB, if you're interested in doing that, this is a group of people that is very committed to trying to figure out how we can do it and how we can make it better. So thanks for the awesome question.
Oh, thanks for answering.
Wes, did you have something to say too? Oh.
So the thing is, we are our own country in many ways, right? The reality is everybody in this room is helping shape the rules and the things that we live by. And the reality is, unfortunately, just like in the real, country worlds, other things impede, other things get in the way, and the best that you can do is keep pushing for the thoughts and the freedom that you want to express within your environment. The nice thing about the internet is that the boundaries don't really quite work like maybe certain governmental bodies want them to. My favorite slide, I think I heard in an IETF meeting a long time ago, is that in order to communicate in Canada to Canada, you ended up having to go through Chicago, right? And so there's the routing topology and everything else doesn't work. To a large extent, the global corporation that sort of sits and facilitates the internet, we already do act as one. And that's the job of this group, to make sure that that's always going to be the case. So keep doing what you're doing and keep participating here.
Oh, thank you for the answer.
Yeah, and I'll make one more comment here. My wife works in local government, and so I get to hear a lot of commentary kind of from the other side. And I think sometimes with, I've seen tendencies in technical communities to think, we could do all this ourselves. And it's great to have technical expertise. And there are a lot of great things that engineers are good at, but governance and policy and laws, those are hard things. And we also need to not have too much hubris as technical communities to think that we can do all those things. And we need to work in partnership and understand how the technical communities and governments can work together to come to great solutions.
Oh, thanks.
Please.
So one of the things I've done in the last year, sorry to double answer, but one of the things I've done a lot in the last year is talk to a lot of politicians and a lot of technical people. And the thing is that we all have to communicate a lot better, because the reality is that the technical people think, oh, our solution's right? And the reality is the policy people aren't making up problems that don't exist. They really do have problems. And the problem is that the policy people are frequently coming up with solutions that can't be implemented technically, right? And without both of those two parties coming together, we end up with solutions that can't be implemented, or technical stuff that aren't really solving the problems of the real world. So I would encourage also everybody to get together and actually talk to the other side. You'll find that once you get into the problem-solving dialogue, it's not quite as clear-cut, dry as you would originally hope.
Okay, thanks again.
Great. I think next we have Pete. Hey, Pete.
Hi, this is Pete Resnick. I promise I'm not going to complain about your terrible choices in appointing certain people to certain roles. I just actually wanted to get up and say the first IAB Open with the WSIS discussion I thought went incredibly well and was very useful. And I hope to encourage you to do more of those sort of more interesting external facing activities and showing them to the community, because I think that was really helpful for me.
Thank you, and I'm glad to hear that was well received, and a big thank you to everyone who helped prepare that too. It's really important. Okay, Tobias.
Tobias Siebig, Max Planck Institute for Informatik. I'm more of an academic, so I don't really have a question, but more of a comment. It was said earlier that everyone in this room could do it in the context of diversity, I think. And I would like to remind that the point is exactly about those people not in the room.
All right. That's a good point. Thank you. All right. Do we have any other questions, comments for the IAB? Okay, going once, going twice. All right, thank you all. And next up, I believe we have the LLC.
Are you? I thought you were running this, but I'm doing that. Thank you. Got it. So as you've seen all the leadership bodies, it's time for the next series of handovers, and that's about those in the IETF Administrative LLC. So I wanted to say a couple words about Jason and Sean, who with great kind of sadness and with profound gratitude for what they've done are cycling off the board. Just for a little bit of perspective, both Jason and Sean have been on the board for 6 years. They've served 2 terms. So they started in March 2019, and they were the founding members of what we know as the board. It did not exist in this administrative construct. So we have to remember all of the structure that we have with the contracting and how we do kind of manage money investment, that came and had to be started with this board. Jason as the first chair of the board, and Sean handling the money kinds of things. And that included, just for a little bit of perspective, that included hiring an executive director. That included everything we know in terms of contracting, the investment strategy. And we had that little roller coaster financially, how we were going to ride out all of those meetings when we were remote only, what was going to happen with the sponsors during COVID. And they laid the foundation for all of that administrative footprint that we so rely on, that pulls off all these successful meetings. So really just on behalf of the community, Sean and Jason, who can't be with us, thank you so much for establishing us on such great footing to allow the internet standards development to continue and for us to have such a profound impact around the world. So with that, we have 2 new members of the board, and we will continue with our tradition of dot passing. Okay, the mic line is open for questions. Yeah.
All right, I'm up here, though I'm off because they're new and they don't remember everything. So go ahead.
This is Barry Lieba, and if the second person in the queue would get up, it's actually my question's directed toward Dayan. I picked the least crowded stage to use an open mic to the NomCom chair because there doesn't seem to be a way to do that. So you had said that it's difficult, that a lot of the things that NomCom does are difficult, and one of them is all the interviews during the meeting, the November meeting, that keep you away from the community and the other IETF work. Why does the NomCom these days persist in doing face-to-face interviews rather than doing them online?
We are not.
Good. Oh.
So this is something that is not being, one of the processes that is not being defined. And we do in person. We also do over the WebEx. We have problems, NomCom voting members to participate in all the meetings, and there was a big discussion. Can we use the AI transcript? Because we could not get like 3 people for every interview. And this is an ongoing situation. So should we be able to start using the technology or not? People are worried about the privacy, and I'm saying the technology is there. Some people are saying this is not being used for training. It's being deleted afterwards. And somehow I feel sometimes that we are making our jobs unnecessarily hard because we are sticking to some old conventions that are just obsolete. And I also don't think that every single nominee should be interviewed. That the community should get engaged before and get all the feedback about the nominees 2 to 3 weeks before the IETF starts, that we can start deciding who will we invite for the interviews and who obviously didn't qualify at the beginning. Actually who are not qualified when we are doing the reviews of the nominees, because we can do that upfront and save time for the third meeting in in November.
Okay, great. Thanks for the answer, and it's your turn.
I have a question about for the IETF LLC. I see participation at the IETF as an economic privilege. How can we do to reduce the cost of IETF participation? Even large corporations are putting pressures on the people to reduce the participation in the IETF. There has been previously ideas brought up to make one meeting completely remote meeting, in order to save travel budgets for the participants. And this could also make the IETF more affordable. A lot of people are saying, well, the value of the IETF are the bar buffs, the bar meetings, the hall meetings, which is true. But we should try to, in my opinion, also try to have one remote meeting, fully remote, that could level that remote participation discrimination and make it easier for people to participate better.
Right. So you saw Roman's figures before, right? It was around 40% people, like they are remote only. So what is the problem exactly? Not all remote, or?
So there has been, discussion. There is this 40%. There is the hackathon, participation, all remote. Now, there are some more statistics or data correlations that I would like to see, but it would be also people that are remote are disqualified in the leadership elections because people will not meet them and will not know them due to the most of the leaders are here that are usually physically present. Those are the ones that are being elected. If you're not known by the community physically, it will be hard to elect you as a leader. And if you have one meeting remote, you will be somehow forced to learn the people even without their being physical.
We can have something data-driven. I agree. I mean, just to look at the KPIs and see in which direction we want them to go. As you know, I mean, the remote participation tools, they have been improving dramatically. If you look back like 20 years ago. So yeah, I mean, happy to continue working on it and considering anything that could improve the situation, sure.
And since the NomCom angle about eligibility was kind of invoked, the answer to changing that is something coming from the community and being run through the consensus process, not run by the LLC.
Yeah, that was all I could say. All right, well, I was actually remiss. We did not do introductions.
We didn't do introductions first. That's
Hi, I'm George. I'm Incoming LLC.
Roman Dinelio.
Sean Turner out of here.
Gonzalo. And Jay Daly, IETF Executive Director.
All right. Hi.
And worth mentioning, our chair is not online and neither is Shauna Turner. Oh,
I'm
Shauna.
here. I'm here. Hello. Hi, everyone. I miss you.
My apologies, I couldn't crank my neck so far, so far to the right.
I'm probably shockingly large behind you there. Don't worry.
Q Meisel, Max Planck Institute for Informatics. I'm bringing up the eternal question of meeting locations, and more specifically, the United States. Now, I'm sure everyone is aware of the recent political changes in the US and how impractical or nigh on impossible this makes the US to go to for many members who are currently sat here or who are otherwise involved in the IETF community. The official advice from the German government is that I cannot enter the US. I will be arrested for what the US considers visa fraud because I am trans, and if I present a female passport at the border, the US considers this fraud now. So I am unable at all to travel to the US. This is not a I need to apply for a visa several months in advance problem. This is a I cannot go. And this is true for quite a few people here and in the community. So my question is, what is the LLC doing about considering this for meeting locations? Has the LLC considered changing the meeting location for 127, as many people will not be able to attend it? And a broader question for the community here and listening online, do we need to rewrite the RFC on where the meetings are held? Because it seems the world has changed since that was written.
So I'll take a couple of those. The other one. The last one I can't. So what I can say is that obviously we constantly consider meeting locations. As of the 5th of March, we had not decided. We decided not to move the San Francisco meeting. It's already been moved a couple of times. Moving it will be a financial difficulty. So, but that is going to be taken up in the retreat that's going to happen. So I'm out, but the new people will consider what's going to happen. I mean, that's the truth, right? That's all I got to tell you, exactly the truth.
You have decided not to move it, or you have not decided to move it?
As of the 5th of March was to not move it.
Okay.
It will be discussed again, I'm sure. Okay. Yes, go ahead, Jay.
So the other thing is that the situation in the US for visas and other things is by no means clear and is changing constantly,
yes,
as we are aware. It's exceptionally difficult to plan when something is announced one day, turned back the next day, re-announced the next day, turned back again the other day, and then changed the next day. You're aware. So that level of planning is very difficult. It's also very difficult when the evidence that we have about the way that people are treated is very specific to one or two individuals so far. It's complicated. It makes it very, very difficult for that level of planning. So we need to see more data for the board to be able to make a better decision about this. Things need to settle down a little bit, because if it's acting on what are suspicions or what are individual, potentially small number of actions, could be, quite problematic. So that's, we need to get further down the road.
I would argue the fact that things are changing day by day and even hour by hour is evidence enough that the US cannot be in consideration for a meeting location.
Yeah.
We heard you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mohammed. Oh, there it is.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karim from Comoros. This is my first participation at IETF meeting. I really appreciated the openness and multi-stakeholder model you are applying in IETF. I have a small question. Why meetings are not planned in Africa? I saw a lot of location, North America, Asia, and Europe, but none in Africa. Why any meeting can be done in Africa? Thank you very much.
So until just very recently, the threshold for agreeing a meeting outside of the three regions of North America, Asia, and Europe required community consensus to go forward with that. That's now changed. We now have a position where the LLC can consider what is called an exploratory meeting, which is outside of those regions. And so we are now able to start looking at a meeting in Africa. It is our meeting planning is many years ahead generally, while you might not see them announced until quite closer to the time that normally at least 1 or 2, sometimes 3 years of negotiation have gone in to get us to that point. So Africa is something that we are beginning to look at now, but it will be some years likely before we're able to go there.
If I may, is it possible, because in the planning we see location, but are in terms of requirement, what the period that the community decides when the community will decide to a meeting in Africa? Because for the forthcoming meeting already planned in Europe, in North America and Asia. So may you give more reason on the timeline when the community will be consulted for such consideration in Africa? Thank you.
So there is, it is no longer a community decision. It is an LLC decision, but it does require engagement with the community and discussion with the community. So, you know, there's still a strong community aspect to it. We are not yet, so we have started having conversations with people about where we might meet in Africa and what that would entail and other things, and whether or not we can have a viable meeting there, because there are, and viability meaning both commercial, financial viability and viability of the standards process, which is something that the IESG determines. So those conversations are still at an early stage, so that's why we have not yet identified any particular meeting that could possibly be held in Africa.
Thank you.
Tobias.
So Tobias Wiebig, Max Planck Institute for Informatics, and please consider all the outrageous things I'm going to say to be speaking for myself and not for my affiliation. So we earlier heard one of my students speak, and I personally do not really feel comfortable with the response because it felt a bit like deflecting, appeasement, and it raises a question in me what responsibility for one's staff means. Because, as I said, it's a student of mine, PhD student of mine. And for me, responsibility means that where my students are not welcome, and we are talking about an eradication of identity here. The United States, under the current rules, and I acknowledge there has been a lot of change, but that attack on people and on humans is very much consistent since the grab for power. I cannot go to such a place as a responsible manager, even if I was allowed in. And that also raises a question for me from the monetary argument. What is the cost of an IETF meeting planned for probably 900,000 attendees, where maybe a lot more people think of their responsibilities as leaders for those people who are not permitted in or who are not safe to get in and maybe also attend remotely.
Thank you. Jim?
Jim Reid, thanks very much. I've got a couple of comments to make. This whole issue around the choice of venues for meetings is an incredibly hard problem. And I think most of the people that are in the floor here probably don't have a full appreciation of the difficulties, unlike the folks that are sitting on the podium right now. But first of all, I'll start with a flippant remark. We had a colleague here from the Comoros ask why we don't go to Africa. Well, I would love to see an IETF meeting in Africa, and I think we've just found a local sponsor for that meeting. I would just seal off the question of choosing venues for meetings because of the problems around immigration laws and how frequently they change and so on. Some of the difficulties here are intractable, particularly for the LLC, because you're going to book a hotel for a venue perhaps 1-2 years out from now, sign a contract, And that contract will have heavy penalties if you do not honour the contract by cancelling the location. And in that situation, the IETF's in a bind. If the rules change and people can't come, what does the IETF do? Can they walk away from the venue and take $1 million, $2 million hit? And then can they find some other location that could accommodate the meeting at very short notice? That's a very, very difficult problem to solve, especially for a meeting of the size of, 1,000 people. It's not easy to say, oh, we can just shift from, let's say, from San Francisco to Montreal and do it overnight in a heartbeat. It won't work that way. And so I think the sad reality is, much as I sympathise with the people who have got concerns about going to the United States, and I share those concerns, I think sometimes we just have to suck it up. And if the problems are just too difficult for certain people, for whatever personal or business or contractual reasons that they have, maybe they just have to sit that meeting out and participate remotely. Sorry.
Ted.
Howdy, Ted Hardy speaking as an individual. You may remember me from previous mic lines where I discussed inclusiveness at the IETF. Our friends in Buenos Aires certainly remember. I will not break into Spanish this time, but I will say I completely support the previous intervention by Q. What we're talking about now goes considerably beyond what would be acceptable. RFC 8718, which was the result of the process that was kicked off by that intervention, explicitly calls out this: while the IETF strives to be as inclusive as possible, both online and in person, maximal meeting attendance in and of itself is not a goal. That is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about maximal meeting attendance at this point. We're talking about whether or not striving to be inclusive allows us to meet in a place which deliberately harms the rights of large classes of people. This is not just about trans people, although it would be fine if it were. This is about all women. The reality is that the access to healthcare to women who are pregnant or might become pregnant in the US is severely compromised because certain things are no longer permitted. And this does not matter where in the US you are. It means that the access to the due process of law for people who hold valid visas is not being respected at the border. We cannot claim to strive to be inclusive and to continue to look at a venue which does not guarantee those things seriously. There is a point made in the thing that if this costs money, I believe it was Randy Bush said he'd put up 1K, I'll match it. We can fundraise around this if we need the money. This is more important than that.
Andrew.
Hi, Andrew Campling. Two comments. One on this whole location question, specifically the US. I wonder if we could perhaps split it into two parts. Can we solve specifically the San Francisco thing, as given the contractual commitments, but separately, can we also say that for the time being, the US generally is not a location that will be considered for future meetings, regardless of what the decision is about San Francisco? And make sure we don't lose the second in getting caught up about the financial implications of the first. So that's one point. Second point is to change countries for a moment. It'd be useful to get an update on 125, please, if there's anything you can say about that.
I think you may have missed the update on 125 earlier during my presentation. It has been a complicated contracting process that we are still in the middle of, and we will announce when we are able to complete that.
Dean? The community feels safe as each member of the community feels safe. We cannot exclude any single person and saying it, oh, it doesn't matter. And if we are really led primarily by potential loss of money, I think it's better to stand by our principles than, bowing down to the pressure of the money. And ask, the community at the end, this is the issue, and we would like to put our principles ahead of the financial considerations. This is something that you as the LLC should be asking us and not making the decision based on the on the data that you have. Ask us before you make some of those decisions. It would be a monetary loss, and I can tell you there are some people, we discussed that, some of us would be willing, to put our, mouth where, to walk the path that we are talking about.
Okay. Tommy?
I hear the concerns around, it's hard to plan around dynamic events. That said, this isn't something we can compromise on, echoing what others have said. I think in addition to thinking about 2025 and 2026, thinking in the long run to set ourselves up for good success, I believe that we should encode what we define as inclusive as something that needs to be enshrined in the country for a history of at least N years to qualify as future venues, which will then solve this dynamic, whoa, it just happened. Well, they're just disqualified. And then it can be part of our future contracts. So that instead of saying, well, what are we going to do about this contract with San Francisco? We can say, you broke the contract, or we have this escape clause in the contract. Because we're going to keep having this discussion for a long time because humans aren't great to each other. But I agree with what's been said. This isn't really about logistics. If it were, we would never have gone back to in-person meetings after COVID. That we did clearly indicates that we see value in being in the same place. And if we're willing to meet in places where we know that some people can't come, not because of their own personal circumstance, but because of who they are, we have failed. I will also match donations if that's what we need to do.
Suresh?
Thanks. Hey, Suresh Krishnan. So there's two things. One thing I want to talk to Q about is the RFC that specifies the rotation talks about geographical regions, not countries. So it's not like the US we are talking about. So it doesn't need to change very much. So somebody suggested Greenland as a place because it's in North America, but not in the US. But that's something we can talk about. But also the other thing is one thing to talk to Mohammed about, right? So when this community process ran to select this meeting policy and get it written down, this was something I was explicitly asking for the community, right? Saying is this a way for us to do outreach, or is it a way for us to split the pain between people who are already participants? And the clear answer at the time was we want to split the pain between how the participants are right now. So we're not optimizing for getting new people in. So that's something that probably needs to get revisited to see, because it's been a while since we started writing this down. But the goal was really to take the participants, make their travel pain and time zone pain, and distribute it across the set of people. So I just wanted to point that out. If that changes, that's fine. But that's something that was not explicitly a non-goal when we wrote that down. Thanks.
Ron?
Hey, so first I want to thank Ted for, there's a saying, you should put your money where your mouth is, or put up or shut up. And I want to thank Ted for putting up. Second, I think for splitting the decision about whether we do this particular meeting in San Francisco or not, and the future meetings. For the future meetings, I previously mentioned that Mexico and Costa Rica have visa policies which are pretty appropriate for a large number of countries. So I want to say that again and hope that is considered. And I'm curious to see what the reaction is. I think both of those countries have facilities that could technically host an IETF and logistically host one. Finally, I lived in Africa for a while. I love, I would love to have an IETF in Africa. I think that it's a big lift, but I think that what I proposed last IETF was what if we have a regional African hackathon that's sponsored by the IETF? I think that being able to show that there is interest in particular areas or in particular working groups on working on stuff, I think that's a good way to get interest, and I think it's a good way to get people engaging with the IETF. So thank you, sir.
So, Rowan, in response to Mexico, firstly, we have looked at Mexico thoroughly, and we have not identified any venues that are suitable for us there. The main issue being that those type of venues generally expect people to come and have an all-inclusive stay rather than the type of setup that we have. So it might appear that there are venues of the right size and those things, but the terms under which you can get them are not suitable for the type of meeting that we have. I don't think we would want that kind of meeting. We have not looked at Costa Rica before now. Now that because it is outside of the regions, and so until recently that was under the old policy that required community consensus to look at that. So now we can start to look at those things, but that has not been one of our priorities to look further within South America at the moment. So, and if we were to look there, I think we would probably be looking at a country like Chile for a variety of other reasons, you know, why we think that might be more suitable. So that type of process, looking broader, is something we need to go through. Just one other thing I just want to remind people about May that when we met in Vancouver recently, we had a very large number of people coming from Asian countries who are unable to get visas. The world is a very complicated place when it comes to going to these type of things. I understand that the US is going through a period of turmoil and changing significantly, but the set of countries that might meet an ideal standard is extremely low. We would largely be meeting, you know, in a country in Europe 3 times a year if we wanted to do that. We have and now that is something the community could agree, you know, that's fine. We have a policy set out that we need to distribute the pain in some ways. And there are, you know, subtleties and there are real principle considerations within that. But it is going for something that entirely fits our principles is simply not generally possible unless we make a very, very bold decision about that. And this is something that is actually likely to get worse as well. So we have to be careful about any decision we make there, not to box ourselves into a corner. So I'm not suggesting we shouldn't go that way, but if the community needs to think about that, there is a depth of conversation that needs to be had here, I think.
I had 2 things I wanted to say here, one of which is I had a participant in one of my working groups who said they couldn't go to Singapore because being gay, they could be arrested in Singapore. The law was on the books. They didn't feel safe going to Singapore. There will always be cases like that. The other thing, speaking about cancelling San Francisco, as if it is an unrelated to the rest of the world act, I've run organizations before that have failed to fulfill their commitments, and it doesn't just have that one commitment. I took over after we'd failed to fulfill a commitment. We had issues booking venues afterwards because we were no longer a reliable, trustworthy entity. And I'm worried about that for the IETF as well. If we cancel, what does that do for our ability to book other locations and be trusted as a reliable booker?
Jean-Frédéric? Yeah, Jan-Fred, speaking as a complete individual, I think one point that we should think about is how much comfort we are willing to give up in order to not go to meeting locations where not all of us can participate. So I completely appreciate how much effort it is to plan a conference with 1,000 people. It's immense what you do here. It's great. You provide a great meeting experience, but if cost is a concern, then maybe changing venues to venues that cost less, maybe involve walking from one building to another because they are adjacent but not in the same building for working group sessions, not having it in a big conference hotel, but a conference center where the hotel is a few minutes away. Maybe that can reduce cost. Speaking as an organizer for a conference for student representation committees, so we have roughly 250 people attending. It's a fourth of what we have here, and obviously not the same requirements. And I mean, we're students, so we sleep in a gym in sleeping bags. I don't want to have you sleeping in sleeping bags. You can have a hotel, but maybe that is a way to reduce cost, especially in view of the San Francisco meeting, because I will not attend there as well.
So the costs are actually the other way around. A conference hotel like this is considerably cheaper than a conference center. Effectively, they give us the space for free because you are subsidizing that through the rooms that you rent here. With a conference center, we have to pay outright for the conference center, and that is a much more expensive way forward. So we do that where we need to for certain places, but if we're talking solely from the cost perspective, this is by far the cheaper method.
Okay, thanks for that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's also multiple contracts because you have one for the conference center and one for the hotel. It's slightly more complicated. Minor point, but still. Tobias?
Tobias Fiedich, speaking very much for myself and acknowledging that I might be getting a bit frustrated. I hear the arguments and the points that sometimes you have to suck it up and not go to that meeting. But I mean, what are we talking about this? It's always easier to make that statement if you're not the one going to a camp. And incidentally, you might see me standing here, white, male, and privileged, but I think the health ministry in the United States also recently recommended camps for people like me for totally different reasons. And I see the reaction, but that is what Mr. Kennedy said. That is what Mr. Kennedy recommended. So we are not talking about a state of turmoil. We are talking about the United States going through something which puts it for many people, for many members of our community, in a severely dangerous situation comparable to the situation in many other countries where I'm pretty sure the IETF would not consider going. And in the end, it boils down to the question for me, what does it mean to be an engineer? And for me personally, being an engineer means making the world a better place for everyone. And I don't think that the approach we are currently taking there does do that.
Philhelm?
Yeah, I think that there are two issues here. The first is, what do you do after 127? I would, for one, would be extremely disappointed if there was an IETF 130 in the United States. And I'm currently a permanent resident. I'm wondering if I'm going to manage to go into Boston without being beaten up and detained like other permanent residents have been there. As far as 127 goes, I think that we have to, cancelling it may not, it looks like it's a non-starter, but we may have to work on the expectation that that's going to be a null, effectively a null meeting. I am severely concerned about the prospects for civil order. I mean, like, we had riots across the United States in 2020. You have a weak president, you have a weak government, they cannot sustain law and order. The fact that they're autocrats doesn't mean that they're competent when it comes to maintaining order. And I seriously wonder if San Francisco is going to be a place where people are going to be flying into after 18 more months of what's been going on.
David?
David Lamparter, white male with a very powerful passport. Hearing all of this discussion, I think I would like to extend a little bit on Deanne's point. A remote participation in the IETF is very different when it's an on-site event to the point of it's really not comparable. I don't think you can equate it to full participation. And if all of these discussions we are having here right now turn out to be as unsolvable as they sound right now, then I think that's even more of an argument to say that one of these meetings needs to be all remote just in order to have equal grounds. And that is, I think, also Deanne's point. It's different if everyone is remote, because then it is actual equal standing for everyone to participate. And that is one possible approach to handle at least some of this. And I say this with a lot of regret because I know I personally won't be able to deal with that. I just don't do well with remote meetings, but still, maybe that is necessary at this point. I don't see this getting better.
So as you'll remember, we held a number of fully remote meetings during the pandemic, and we looked at this question of equality quite considerably. And we live on a planet with different time zones. And that was very, very well made clear by many people that that was a major issue about whether or not they could participate. The other thing was many people explained about their personal circumstances that meant that they could not have somewhere where they could work from at home or easily or other things. So I understand that there are, that is a different type of thing that attempts to level people by going fully online, but it is a very long way from putting everybody on an equal footing.
I absolutely agree, but I will point out you also have sampling bias because the people who attend are the one who you asked, I assume, and those have been the ones who have been able to get involved, right? So there is a question of the people who aren't able to even get there aren't part of the set that you're sampling here.
Stephen?
Hi, so I'm sure the LLC will be talking more about San Francisco. I think one of the issues is a number of people, myself included, would be feeling and probably very confidently feeling that I'm not likely to attend in person. Would the LLC commit to doing a survey to see how many people are confident that they would not turn up or feel that they would turn up, and feed that into your calculations versus the cost of cancelling, and come back to the community with results?
It is a question. I'm no longer on the LLC board, so I'm hesitant to commit them to it.
I think that's a reasonable suggestion. As Sean said, I think a number of questions ago, that at the retreat, we're going to really think about what's happening with the meeting. That's reasonable input for us to consider.
So, okay, so again, I'd ask that the LLC commit to asking the community to get some data as to how many people currently plan not to turn up in person, because given the remote fee waivers, surely that will feed into the financial calculations as well, right?
Yes, that is true.
Tommy?
So thank you, Sean, for committing the LLC to doing that.
It's not what I did.
Couple things. I think Warren was the one who mentioned something in chat that I think was worth bringing to the mic line, which is, maybe this just means we do have a strongly restricted set and we repeat venues. I mean, we talked earlier, or it was raised earlier, that the intersection of our current guiding principles of we spread out across the world versus we pick locations that are fully inclusive of our demographics will be an empty set. Maybe we should ask ourselves that hard question about which is more important. Spoiler alert, I think inclusion's more important. I get money is a thing. I think we should be budgeting to do what it is we think is important. And I understand the wisdom in doing a survey and seeing the mentality of the room, but I am honestly, does it really matter what percentage of people are being excluded or being discriminated against?
Yes.
No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't matter.
I think one of the important things to remember here is that the sets of people who are excluded do not necessarily overlap in the way that you might expect. Yeah. There is a very, up until now,
there has been a very, very big issue with people, say, from Africa, people from multiple Asian countries being able to get visas to come to Europe, any country in Europe, any form of Schengen visa at all, being able to come to many, many countries, in the US and other things like that. And that has been a significant problem of exclusion. And we saw that even in Canada until recently. So I'm not trying to suggest that's the most important dimension, okay? But the problem when it comes to inclusion is that when you look across all of those dimensions and how they affect the people here, it is very, very complicated. There is not somewhere where we can go and say, right, that meets our standards for inclusion.
And so I guess what I'm saying is, if that list is empty, we should become an online forum and find ways to do that. I don't think that having us all in person is very rewarding when we look left and right and realize the empty seats are empty, not because, we have our own personal events, hey, I missed this time because, etc. Anyway, I hear what you're saying. I guess what I'm saying is I would rather meet all online and address this problem of, well, how do we help create spaces for people? Maybe we do multi-sites for people. Like, do we have hybrid join with 4 locations? I guess what I'm saying is we're looking at this as, can we deal with the inclusion problem? And I'd rather flip that and prioritize and start with, we have to be inclusive. What traditions do we need to break to get to a point where we can be respectful of each other?
Dean?
Multi-site and multi-week. Why do we have to be within 1 week? Especially if we are looking to do, or when we are looking across all the time zones. We can spread the time zone pain over 2 weeks across the community. If we are trying to organize an online meeting, we really don't have to have it so highly concentrated, because this is the beauty of the online. You don't have to have everything tightly packed into one, into 1 week, because here we are traveling here and we are all physically present. So if you say it's an online meeting, you can have, we can organize a multi-hub meeting over 2 or even 3 weeks and achieve the same amount of work that we do in 1 week. It would be just differently organized for each one of us. Online gave us much more freedom that we had before, where we had to be physically present versus we can do it virtually.
Jim?
Thanks. I think this discussion we've been having here has been fascinating, but to my mind, I think we're trying to focus a lot on implementation detail rather than trying to deal with the higher level strategic things that we should be expressing here in our views that we're presenting to the LLC board. We can trust the LLC board to make the right decisions as best they can with information that's available at that time. So the question I would have about this choice of venue issue is really a rhetorical one. Is you make a decision to host a meeting in some location, and then the rules of the game change because, let's say, for example, new visa restrictions come in, something that's completely outside the control of the IETF. And then the question for the IETF is, what do you then do? Do you have your contracts backstopped with a way of not having to pay penalties to the venue? Or do you have a backup location sitting lucky in the shadows that can be pulled out of a hat at the last minute if it's needed? These are the things maybe that the LLC could consider, but that's the sort of thing I think we have to really get you guys to work on and come up with solutions for it. I'm not asking you to come up with solutions right here and now, but then you can be mindful of all the concerns about the diversity and inclusion and the costs. I think that's the way to proceed here, and that's the thing I think that I would like to see the LLC focus on. I think that's the more important thing here.
Okay, thanks. Matt.
Building up on Jim's point, and also my previous mention about why don't we become a country? What if we find an unclaimed piece of land and then we could just own that and then build a city, and we could become a permanent
we joked about getting a boat at one point, so that's been thought of and it didn't really work. Yeah. So I think we'll take that one to the list. All right. Aftab?
I was waiting for you to pronounce it properly. You did it. Thank you. Aftab Siddiqui. I'm speaking as a board member of an organization who organized one of the largest events in this region, Asia Pacific. It's called Apricot. And Jay knows very well. We have canceled 3 events in 30 years, and no one has blacklisted us ever. We have canceled Thailand a couple of times and came back and did big events. So the assumption that once you cancel an event because of a force majeure, it puts you in a bad reputation or something. It could be a thing in the US, but I don't think that applies to everywhere else. And one more thing I want to highlight that still 17, 18 months remaining in that event, having someone not feeling comfortable going to a country versus that country is saying you are not allowed to come to the country are 2 separate things. Please do not conflate both of them. The example of Singapore was totally different from what is happening in the US. I hold one of the passport, which most likely will be blocked to enter that country in a couple of weeks or maybe months. But I also hold another passport, which gives me a reason to go to 190 countries. Not everybody has that luxury. I have been detained in New York airport for 4 hours with that passport, which gives me access to 190 countries. I have been there a couple of times. It doesn't matter. It was probably just a fluke. But I don't think so. I would try that. Or I would think, I'm not a very regular person in IETF, but I would say that consider that people will not be allowed to enter that country. It's not a choice anymore for them, whether they feel comfortable or not. If they try to enter, I don't know what's going to happen with them. So please do not conflate a couple of things together. Thank you.
Jay?
So just very briefly on the first point, we have cancelled this same venue 3 times, and we have cancelled other meetings, and we cancelled quite a few because of COVID and other reasons. So we are in a different reputational zone from Apricot with 1 cancellation. So that's not to say it's a reason. It's just, I think, just a clearer statement of the current situation.
Mike.
Mike Bishop. I have a couple of comments on this. I guess the first one is I hear a lot of people volunteering to donate certain amounts of money toward the expense of canceling and relocating. I question how much that adds up to versus the actual cost. I don't know that I've heard an estimate from the LLC on the estimated cost of canceling the venue contract, booking another venue on short notice. I think it might be useful to know what that number is.
All I can say is several $100,000.
Okay, that's actually less than I thought, but I'll also comment that from the last time we decided not to meet in the US, the issue was not exclusion of people. The issue was unpredictability, that people who had visas were being turned away on the day of their travel. And so people could not plan appropriately whether they were able to attend in person or remotely. I'm very sympathetic to there's no location that everyone will be able to get to easily or perhaps at all. I think the higher order bit is, can you tell in advance whether you are able to? In the US, I don't know if people can. I think there's just too much turmoil there. I understand if for financial reasons we need to keep the San Francisco location for the one that's already under contract. The ones that are further out, I would love to see us stay with stability wherever we can find it. And if that means it's somewhere that some of us can't go, I hate that. But it's going online only is not going to get us to the standards work that we exist to get done.
Q Meisel, there was some offhand remark made several questions ago about it would be a bad thing for the IETF to be in one place consistently. And I'd just like to say maybe it wouldn't. If the IETF is in one place consistently and has a home, then it might be possible for the LLC, and I know this is possible with other international organizations, to come to an agreement with that country on allowing people in specifically for the purposes of the conference and the organization. The problem that happens at the moment is it keeps moving all over the world. So, you know, it's a different country has to deal with it every time. So this is both a question to the LLC that can you look into this as a possibility, and a question to the community about how much would we care about the IETF being stuck in the one place we've decided is the most appropriate.
We cannot get countries to change their laws to
This is
change
not
the visa
changing
process.
laws. This is existing visa processes that exist for international organizations.
You mean become an international organization and have everybody here become a delegate towards the international organization and those type of things?
No, that's not like become the UN. That's not what I'm suggesting. There is something between a random meeting in a country and the UN. There are policies for this in countries' visa policies that should probably be looked into.
I don't believe there are.
Do you have examples of non-treaty organizations that have pulled that off that we could pattern?
Not off the top of my head, but there are sorry?
There's only one.
There's only...
Well, I work in war zones. What you're asking is only because the people that signed Okay. So such kinds of treaties and visas are only privilege of the UN sponsors organizations, and no other organization will, you won't be able to get that. This is the only reason why all the countries were always able to meet in New York or in Geneva in all the times, because there was a treaty that was guaranteeing entry, even if it was considered an enemy country.
I know, at least in the UK's visa policy, which is the only one I'm particularly familiar with, that it is possible to apply for recognition as some international body and get special visa privileges for that.
And how long will that take?
I have no idea, but if the IETF is in a permanent place, then it doesn't matter if it can't be sorted for one meeting, it can be sorted for 5 meetings in the future or something.
Hi, I'm Bob Hinded. I just wanted to say a little different thing up here is I thought this is a great venue. It's a long trip for me, but I really like being here. I think it's a very effective meeting, and I hope we can come back.
I had the pleasure to go through the secondary in the United States multiple times, although I was the legal resident all the time. And this is one experience that I want to, let's put it this way, anyone to go through. And just to tell you for the comparison, I worked from 91 to 95 in war zones. I've been to 13 different war zone countries, and the experience wasn't differently, and I was used to. But what the impact was on my daughters, this is what kills me. Because how those people treat, how the US customs treat people in the secondary is quite bad. So if we decide to go and do something, and people will come there in the best interest, but some people are being pulled out. So at least in Israel, they'll tell you, we are pulling you out because you look different. In the US, they will pull you out, but they will not tell you because you're looking different. And I don't wish those experiences on other people. And these days, this is happening. They're regularly at the airports, I see being pulled out and put them into the secondary. How much more will that continue? I don't know. But that is a real problem that people will have to face. I know how it's being, in the secondary when you're trying to enter a war-torn country. I passed through that. But the secondaries in the US are very unpleasant.
Randy?
Randy Bush, IJ and Arcus. I served on the precursor to the LLC, the IAOC. So I know the logistics are hell. But that's why you get the big bucks. I think you've gotten the message, or I certainly hope you have. I can understand Jay's lack of comfort with having to deal with the results. Sorry. It's just the way it is. I don't think we want to compromise our ethics for convenience.
Yes. Warren, are you trying to get in the queue? Yeah, why don't you get in the queue?
So a really short thing. I think some people might have misunderstood what Q was saying. As an example, Canada has a special events liaison unit where you register with them 6 months in advance and they will help your participants get visas.
We are registered with them.
Sure.
We were registered with them, and people did not give visas to go
I'm
to
not saying it
to
solves things,
Vancouver.
but that was like 30 seconds of Googling. I know a bunch of other countries, like South Africa has a special thing where if you're a conference, you get that sort of thing. You do get much better priority. And I'm not saying it solves everything. Just
We
people are
always use those processes every single time, and as in Canada, a large number of people could not get their visas to get in.
All right.
All right. Abhijit Singh. So I just wanted to say, I'm looking at what's going on in the US right now, and think about the fact that there's countries who don't even need visas, like Canada, like Germany, and their citizens are being held in these like random prisons for a couple of days. Instead of being turned back, I, as a Canadian, wouldn't even want to go to the U.S. for this reason, and I can imagine someone who's coming from countries that the U.S. doesn't have these kind of treaties with. So someone coming from Asian countries, I can't imagine how much worse their treatment is to be able to come into the U.S. So what I'm trying to say is, I'd rather be in a place where the visas get denied than the visa gets given and then you get there and then you go through a situation like this, which has been happening in the US, and it only seems to be worsening. So I think this should be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Tobias?
Tobias Siedich, again, speaking for myself. I do appreciate that in a certain position, it is sometimes important to carefully formulate what position one takes and carefully formulate how it is defended. However, following up on the two previous points, I would recommend to briefly think about how one would carefully formulate informing the community of one of its members, or maybe even an AD or a working group chair, having been detained for, and not only days, in some of those cases, weeks and months, without any real ability or clear perspective on how that detention and when that detention will end, because that will definitely need some very careful wording.
All right, we have finally drained the queue. Thank you for coming to plenary and staying this late. Thank you very much.
Roman, I'm just gonna grab this laptop.
Oh, yeah.